Yeah, I know. I was reading about that. So the cult thing, that's really interesting topic. What have you like, are there any specific cults that you've studied or
Well, sure. In the book I wrote, Narcissistic Abuse, I aim to fuse the concepts of narcissistic abuse and cult abuse. So if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you are in a cult. You are in a cult of one. You can be in a narcissistic family system and be in a cult of five. We see cults in communities, as you're mentioning, sort of the stereotypical cult that we think
Mhm.
happens, some faraway land. We see political cults. But really, a couple of good examples of cults that are local to me, anyway, were the Nexium cult, which happened in New York and fell apart in 2021. So very recently, not happening in a faraway land. And the Stolen Youth cult was also in New York, and there were only a gaggle of people in that cult, right? So
what was their beliefs or
the Stolen Youth cult is just basically this guy Larry was peddling a story to a bunch of students at Sarah Lawrence College, and had them believing that they were poisoning their parents. I mean, it was sort of crazy things that they began to subscribe to, but it's all about mind control and human conditioning, which is very Pavlovian. Um, as somebody who may have studied any amount of psychology, Pavlov's dog,
Mhm.
and positive reinforcers, we all can fall victim to some of these things. And these manipulators, master manipulators, are very adept at exactly that. So they just know how to manipulate people. And in the Nexium cult, Keith Raniere was branding the women in that cult with his initials, and that fell apart, as I mentioned, in 2021. But these are examples of cults that are near to where I am right now, where I sit in terms of regionally. And they also ended fairly recently. So the idea of a cult, I think, my whole purpose is to destigmatize the idea of people falling victim to cult leaders, because we all are dealing with some level of groupthink. Um,
Mhm.
and it's important for us to develop autonomy and become independent thinkers to insulate ourselves and our children from that kind of scenario where you can fall into some kind of a groupthink mentality. And so that is all coercive control. So there's cults like what you might think of a cult. I'm sort of pushing against the idea of cults being something that happens in a faraway land and has some
Mhm.
deity talking about religion or something. Cults can just be the family across the street where the parent is having this hierarchical, sort of authoritarian experience with that family dynamic, and that is a cult.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, not just this giant group of crazy people in a cave.
Right.
Like there is that one. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, almost like a tribal mentality.
Yes, that's exactly right. And at the helm of every cult is a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath. So we see them in these family systems. We see them, as you mentioned, in sort of the cult that's happening, in the desert somewhere that we have that stereotypical idea of.
Mhm.
And then we see this in political climates where there's just people following blindly. So you have to really kind of think
Mhm.
about coercive control as being something that can happen one on 1 million. There's sort of like different versions of it. And there's so many that pop up. People come to me all the time and they say, I was in a cult. There was this transgender, somebody wants to change their sex. That we saw this with the Twin Flames. It was on Netflix. Like there's different cults that pop up all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why cultic families, cultic systems are all around us. And so not every one of them has a name. They're not going to say, hey, I'm a cult. So yeah, it's a little dynamic, but yeah, that's my whole passion, is to sort of fuse the concepts of narcissistic abuse and cult abuse, because they are the same.
Yeah, that's interesting. And can anyone be victim to that, or is there a certain type of person that?
I think so. I was, and I consider myself intelligent and extremely strong, very pro social, gregarious, outgoing, curious, and I definitely would have robbed a bank in that for that person. I was just
Yeah.
totally in it. So I think it can. And in the stolen youth cult, and I wrote about this in my book also, Felicia Rosario was already a psychiatrist and a MD and a doctor, and she fell for Larry's bullshit as well. So I think that you can be highly educated. You know, there's no
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic tie that I can sort of, you know, um, talk about. There's just no type per se. I think narcissists
Yeah.
cast out a million lines, and if you don't understand it, and if you don't have the boundaries, then you can be victimized.
Because I always hear about, narcissists will prey on, they usually look for, well, maybe, I don't know if they look or they end up with people that are like different person, like maybe more of a people pleaser or
Mhm.
a, so that's not always true then. Yeah.
I don't think so. I get it though, because I think people that are empathetic tend to be in certain roles, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, givers and
Yeah.
pleasing or forgiving characters. But I think that narcissists don't really have a type. It's like, does it have a pulse? They really need attention.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of have a gaggle of supply, different characters. And I'm sure all of these characters have different things that are really wonderful characteristics. But I don't know that the narcissist has a type. I think they will just cast out lines. And if they get a bite, you're in, let's go. You're now in this rotation of people that they will get supply from.